Welcome to the TeacherCast Educational Network, coming to you from the TeacherCast studios since 2011. Join us each week as we bring you the latest educational news, EdTech updates, and hottest interviews with today's most influential leaders in education. And now, for your host, Jeff Bradbury.
Hello, and welcome to the TeacherCast Educational Network. My name is Jeff Bradbury, and welcome to Digital Learning Today. On today's episode, we're going to be talking to the CEO of Canopy Education, not only about the Google Innovator Program, but also how you can become a Google for Education trainer. We're going to go into some different platforms that they have cooking up these days for student support and student badging. And you are not going to want to miss this episode if you're working or coaching in a Google for Education school. So stick around for this episode of Digital Learning Today. My guest today is the CEO of a great company called Canopy Education. He's also a global program lead for Google for Education and the Certified Innovator Program. And in 2020, he was named the EdTech 50 as one of the key people shaping education technology in the United Kingdom. I want to bring on today Mr. Andy Caffrey. Andy, how are you today? Welcome to TeacherCast.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm good, thanks. And thanks for having me on today's episode.
I am so excited to have you on talking all about Google training. Tell us a little bit about some of the things that are happening these days over at Canopy Education.
Yeah, so we're Canopy Education. We're a Google professional development partner. So we provide training support for you schools that use Google Workspace. And that can be across the whole range of Google areas. So that's both training teachers, training students. In the teacher space, that could also be admin console training. So the full sort of Google Workspace area is where we operate.
Now, Google, of course, changes a little bit about itself almost every week. We're always getting these great updates. What are some of the things that you're noticing that have come out in 2024 that you and your team are excited about?
In terms of the latest features, a lot of the some of the smaller stuff, really. Biggest one probably this year, I would say, slides recording. So the ability to natively record yourself inside Google Slides without using third-party tools. So typically, people who use Screencast or one of the other tools when they record their screen, the idea to do that natively in Slides. And when you first look at that, it seems like quite a minor update. One of the things we really focus on at Canopy is how do teachers apply that in the classroom? What's the relevance of that? And we're seeing lots of teachers at the moment asking us around AI. How do I know that a student is doing their work in the original sense? How do I know they produce it themselves? And so something like slides recording is really interesting in that space because obviously if we ask a student to present back to us the work they've done in Google Slides, we can then get an understanding that they understand it. So even if they went and used Gen AI to peruse the slides, the fact they're presenting it back to us again gives us an understanding that they know the material and the concepts. So features like that, that's new this year. From a more organising point of view, from a more management point of view, e-signatures is out in beta, the ability to be able to sign Google Docs. So that's a biggie that's sort of floating around. It's currently in beta, I think, about to go live. Got lots of pushes on AI. Classroom Labs AI is out, so that's quite exciting for those people testing sort of AI inside Google Classroom. So that's good. Lots of features either out or launching.
Well, there's certainly a lot of new AI features coming out with Google, and I think all the teachers are, they're into two different camps. One is how can we leverage, but then the also is how can we help students navigate this world? What advice do you have for teachers right now who are trying to figure out the Google world of AI?
In terms of how do we help students, it's really thinking about how do we deal with the fact that that exists in the world now. You probably sense. I think a lot of people got to the point where we're not going to be able to just ban it. That's not going to be a solution, is it? That's going to really work in the real world. And therefore, it's finding a suitable way of dealing with that, knowing, sort of being valid that that's where for students, training students in the appropriate use of AI. So when is appropriate to use it? And when I think back to the fact that for nearly all of my teaching career, the internet's kicked around. For my entire teaching career, students have gone out and found the work from the internet. I never believed sometimes they would go off and write stuff themselves. It just brings that other piece in, doesn't it? But it's about the responsible use of AI. And I think we are seeing student content around that and more work with students on that. So it's an interesting time to be in this space.
It certainly is. And, as somebody who's starting to play with it, somebody who's teaching it to their students right now, my question that I'm trying to figure out, and maybe you guys have an answer here, is if a student has used it and handed it in as such, what does that conversation look like? I'm trying to figure out, like, how do you go up to a student to say, this isn't your work? What are some of the things that you're finding that teachers can use to go, no, this clearly isn't your words and your language speech. Clearly, you just did a copy and paste. There's a lot of teachers out there that are trying to figure out, how do you have those conversations where you're encouraging the use of technology, but at the same time, please don't do that.
Yeah, and I think we as teachers have seen that that bit isn't something new. I mean, I think back to the amount of times I've seen Wikipedia, including Wikipedia's own hyperlinks and system within the embedded in as an original piece of work, when we all just know that's pasted out of a website or a page. So I think as teachers, we've seen that before. We know what our students are capable of producing. And so we know that, as you point out, like the writing style of a piece from students, I think the identification is there. So it's that conversation about originality. What are you hoping to get out of that as a piece of work? Where were you hoping to go? And it could be, could you present that work in a different way? And I think what we're starting to see a lot more teachers do now as a response of AI is actually think about, well, what choice are we giving students? What are we asking them to produce? Can you show me as a student that you understand a concept? And actually, for some teachers, I'm seeing them ask that as a specific question. So they might be sending out a Google form saying, hand your work in here. How you choose to present I used to be a geography teacher. So we might say, show me about the different types of rainfall. Describe, show me that you understand the different types of rainfall. And what we might have is a Google form, ask for students to hand the work in. So they can hand the work in however they want to show it, with that slides, docs, sheets, a movie, gone and done some research, whatever it is they might be handing in there. And then underneath a statement that says, how do we know that you actually understand this? How are you can you prove to me that you understand this work? And a student could say, well, that's because I've recorded myself presenting it. Or a student could say, that's because I hand wrote it. Or they might say, that's because through version history, you can see the iterations of my work. But asking students to evidence, how is this original? And that one sentence sort of says to a student, well, then my teacher's looking at this, so I need to be able to evidence it. So they might think about how they produce something. So actually flipping that onto the students really useful, I think, as well.
There's so many things that are changing right now. And obviously, at the time we're recording this, we are at the beginning of the summertime. ISTE season's right around the corner, which means all of these companies, Google included, are going through massive changes, brand new stuff, getting ready for back to school. And before you know it, the apps that we know and love are going to look completely different. And, I always like to tell the story of, there was one summer where I spent the entire summer creating an entire Google for Workspace series of videos talking about, go into Google Drive, click on the blue button up on top, go into Google Drive, click on the blue button up on top. And by the time I shared it with my teachers, it was a red button up on top. And that always gets, to the question here of how do we keep on top of all of this stuff? And one of the things that I did and was fortunate enough to be a part of early on in my career was the Google Teacher Academy and getting into becoming a Google for Education innovator. Your company right now is working with Google on that. Tell us a little bit about what Google Innovator looks like these days, and how does somebody become a part of that program?
Yeah, so Google Certified Innovator Program is one of the 3 Champions level certifications. So often teachers will do level 1 and level 2, Certified Educator first, and then sitting above that we have Trainer, Coach, and Innovator, the 3 top level programs. And of those, as probably most well known, I focus on the Innovator Program. And the Innovator Program is the only one of the 3 where there is still a competitive application system. So to become a Google Certified Innovator, you have to attend a Certified Innovator Academy. And that's available both online which has been since 2020. And this year, 2024, back in person as well, with in-person academies. So for the first time ever, you can sort of choose which appropriate route you want to go down. Do you want to go down the sort of the in-person and go to a Google Office for 3 days? Or do you want to go through the process online and do the process through Google Meet? But you have to attend an academy. And each academy has a set number of spaces. And that means when you're applying to the Innovator Program, unlike trainer and coach, the other two programs, you're applying against other people for a set number of spaces. So the application process is a bit more competitive in that respect. And that's makes people focus on that. And that means also not everybody gets in. And I'm very honest to admit to lots of people, it took me 3 attempts. So I applied 3 times, and the first 2 times were rejected. And the third time I was accepted into the Innovation Academy. So, and actually I grew a lot through that process. And one of the things we often talk to students and teachers about is, not everything is success first time. That process of failing and changing your application and iterating and altering it and then applying again is actually an important part of that process. So, so people apply, and they apply with a challenge. And it's a challenge that they want to solve in the world of education. Anyone who works in education can apply. That could be a classroom-facing teacher, but it could be anything that's associated with the world of education. What we're really looking at is that the challenge itself is focused somewhere around the world of education. So people are applying with a challenge, and what we want to hear about is a problem they're currently facing in education. What we don't want to hear about in the application is solutions. So that's what we want to do when we come to Google. When we come to Google, we're going to go through a design thinking process, and we're going to apply the way Google works to that particular challenge, come up with new solutions, iterate on them, and hopefully, through that academy process and through the mentorship that follows, actually on the ground make a difference to that challenge, come up with something that helps that challenge. But that's the process we go through. So that's what the academy is focused on, whether that's online or in person.
I highly recommend anybody who is working in a Google environment or going to be soon, check out this program. Like I said, I've been a Google Innovator since 2012. My goodness, that's 12 years ago. And it has been an amazing family experience. I've had the question of, why do you do it? What do you get out of it? And I think the biggest thing that I've gotten out of it, and I'd love to get your response on this, is you get to have that handshake. You get to be in that family. You get a chance to get connected to other like-minded educators who are out there working and training and thinking and pushing that needle. For me, that is one of those amazing opportunities that I wouldn't have had without the Innovator Program. What's your answer on that? What is the biggest advantage to being in the Google Innovator Program?
Yeah, a lot of people actually identify the community and the other innovators as the top reason. They'll often join for the challenge, or they'll join for they want to get the certification or other reasons. But actually, when they join, they suddenly realize actually it's the people that is the key leader for them. And for me, when I went through the process, it was also about connecting with people who were similar to me. So I was in a school, I was the person in charge of technology across the curriculum. And that was just me as an individual, very much sort of on my own doing that role in a school here in the UK. And the idea that I could connect with people who actually had similar things to me, had similar challenges, who were in a similar role, was something I hadn't really thought about when I applied. I just thought about, I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to become a certified innovator. But actually, it was that piece that suddenly there was more to it than just me and my school, that with this network I could talk to. And actually that the world was bigger than just me and my school. It also sort of broadened my horizons a little. The program had a huge effect on what I now do for a living. But at the time, it just broadened my eyes away from sort of, you can become very insular, well, not insular, but focused on your school and think that everything revolves around your one particular institution. And actually it sort of forced me to think, okay, there's other things happening here. And there's other ways of doing things as well, because there are lots of different approaches in the world of education, and just every approach works somewhere. And so it was sort of identifying that as well, and sort of just expanding my horizons was one of the benefits I saw of it. So community is strong. Obviously, there are some people who are really challenge focused, who actually are like, well, I genuinely want to solve this problem that I applied with, and that's what I'm focused on. And then there are people who want to get sort of that recognition. So want to get that recognition in the community by becoming a certified innovator.
Now, in addition to the Google for Innovation program, there's also a Google Trainer program. Talk to us a little bit about that, and how does somebody apply for that program?
Yeah, so the other two programs that exist at the same level, so trainer, coach, and innovator, is coach and trainer. But the trainer one is focused on people who stand up in the classroom and deliver training. So that one is a more open application process. There is a set criteria. You have to submit an example of you doing some training, some feedback, some slides with it. So you are following a sort of a structure when you apply to become a certified trainer. And therefore, there's not a limit on number of trainers. If you apply, if you follow the criteria correctly, if you follow the instructions, and you do that, you will become a certified trainer. So it's an open process that's available all year round, and we support people at Canopy that become certified trainers. And then the other one is certified coach, and coaching is people who work one-to-one with teachers. So if you're working one-to-one and you're coaching somebody to improve their use of technology in the classroom, that's a sort of coach type role. Then again, you can apply through that process. It's very similar to trainer. It's a collection of evidence, this time around coaching, around your coaching practice, and there's some online learning around the coaching practice. And again, submitting the evidence. And if that evidence is correct, you become a certified coach. So the other two programs sort of open all the time. People can apply whenever they want, become certified trainers or coaches. And then Innovate is the one where you have to go through an academy process, and there's a set number of people.
For more information, you can, of course, check out everything over at canopy.education. But, Andy, the thing that I love about the work that you guys are doing over there, it's not just about the educators. You also have programs out there for students. If you are out there teaching a technology course and you're trying to bring all those Google skills into your students' ecosystems, what are some of the offerings that Canopy offers for teaching students?
Yeah, so in the student space, that's something which we do that's quite, I suppose, unusual compared to other people, because a lot of people in our space focus on teacher training. And very much when we started as an organisation, we were like most other organisations, we were focused on predominantly face-to-face, actually, sort of, going to a school, working with teachers, training them to use Google Workspace. And then COVID really made us sort of think about how we deliver that. And actually, we applied some of the Innovator Academy issues, which is how do we look at a problem and how do we solve a problem? And we sort of applied that to training technology. And particularly in COVID, one of the things that we noticed was, although there was lots of things happening for teachers, it was quite difficult for people to train students. How do we know that students can use Google Workspace? And the solution couldn't be, we'll turn up and we'll just train students, because that isn't scalable. In reality, you can't scale that to a big scale unless there's lots of me's or lots of trainers around. But actually, we thought there must be other ways of doing this. There must be other ways we can teach people how to use Google Workspace. And so at the same time, we partnered with an organisation in Sweden called How Do You, and they built some interactive tutorials. Actually, at the time, focused around training people around marketing tools and Salesforce. And we thought, well, actually, this could be applied to Google Workspace. This sort of works. So we worked in partnership with them and their platform to build what we now call Workspace Skills. It was called, ironically, it was called G Suite Skills at the time, but now called Workspace Skills. Thank you, Google, for the rebrand. And this is a series of interactive tutorials. Teachers assign them in Google Classroom. Students work through them, solve them, and ultimately gain badges. It's micro-credentialed to show their competence in Google Workspace. Go on.
For what grades would this be appropriate for?
We don't put a set age on it, and there's a deliberate reason why we don't that, and that's because different countries, and even at a school level, different schools use technology in different ways at different points within someone's career within that school. So we have here in the UK some very young students who work in schools that are sort of one-to-one Chromebook, and so they're getting a device. So by sort of in UK years, year 1, year 2, so sort of grades 2, 3, they're actually sort of using some of the basic tools within Google Workspace, and therefore they need to know how to use them. So we have some young students doing it. At the same time, we could go down the road to another school, and we've got 14, 15, 16-year-olds using software. Because again, that's the point at which in their organisation they're needing to upskill. So we don't put a set age on it. We focus on, okay, when do you need to learn the different sort of concepts of Google Workspace? And originally, when we built it, we took sort of a bit of guidance from, at the time, the teacher version, the Certified Educator, was a practical exam. And so we sort of tried to replicate that a bit for students. So we sort of leveled it against that. So if you want to look at it in teacher speak, it's sort of similar to Certified Educator Level 1. Ironically, then that exam stopped being a practical exam. So we ended up with a practical exam for students, and the teacher one became a multiple choice exam. But we're still practical. It's entirely based around your ability to use Google Workspace. So people complete the tutorials, they earn the badges. To pass to get the badge, they have to be competently able to use the product. So if you can, do a certain series of tasks in Google Drive, that's how you get the Google Drive badge. But you physically have to be able to do them. You can take the tutorials as many times as you like. So if you take it and you don't know how to make a folder in Google Drive, you can go and learn that and come back and do it again and retry. But sort of that process of sort of breaking it down to micro steps has been really popular in that space. And we are, touch wood, he says, almost on 1 million badges. So we've almost issued 1 million badges to students and teachers, because there are teachers that do it as well. Often teachers will do it alongside their class, or teachers will use it, will themselves realise they could learn this way. So we're about to reach the big 1 million point, which we're anticipating shortly, looking at those numbers.
And so tell me a little bit about how this works. Students log into your application and they have their own Google ecosystem, or
your teacher assigns it through Google Classroom.
Okay.
So a teacher assigns it, it goes out through Google Classroom, they click a link and they go into the tutorial. Inside the tutorial, they're actually using a simulated version of Google Workspace. So we don't work on top of their own version, because we need to sort of control what's in there. So imagine we're asking students to find a file inside Google Drive. We obviously need to control what they're looking for, so we know that the file is there in the first place. So we can use a simulated environment. So actually, although what it looks like on the screen to them is they're using Google Workspace, in reality, we're controlling that environment. So we're controlling the look and the style and what's in there, what they'll find and what they won't find. So it's almost sort of a controlled, safe space for them to do the tutorials in. That means they're not using their own areas or their own drive or their own doc sheets and slides. They're working in as, and that ability to be able to control that environment then allows us to create the scenarios that they can work through when they complete the tutorial.
How similar of an experience or program is this to, I think, what some of us are familiar with Google Applied Digital Skills?
It's slightly different, because it's more focused on your ability to be able to do certain tasks and almost measuring it in that way. Some people use them alongside. Sometimes we're used as a bit of a testing engine in that respect. Okay, so I've done this piece of work. How do I know they know it? Okay, let's go and do this. Let's go and see if we can earn the badge. So perhaps we're more, perhaps slightly more testing in that respect than perhaps the Applied Digital Skills curriculum is. There are some similarities between the two, both focused around challenges, both broken down into topics. We sort of see that as a training resource, whereas we're more of a sort of standalone resource, but we also can be applied in scenarios where the teacher isn't giving instruction. And that's one of the areas we also see people using Workspace skills, because obviously the tutorial will work you through it. And so if you don't know how to do something, the tutorial kicks in and explains it. So let's imagine, sticking with my example of Google Drive, I don't know how to make a folder in Google Drive. As soon as I start going wrong, the help system will kick in and start to explain how to build a folder. Because it's doing that, I could be therefore left to work individually. So whilst a lot of people use it in the classroom and we'll do all the tutorials as a class together, we also have the idea of being assigned to students to do remotely. And that's particularly used in cases where students are joining a school who might be heavily using Google Workspace, but they might be coming from a school who isn't. And so we see quite a lot of work, particularly across international schools where student movement is high, where a student might be coming into that, and they're coming in mid-year into a school where everyone uses Google Classroom, and all the students know how to use it because they're coming to a year group where it's quite, they've used it for quite a while. How do we get a student in and working if that's our environment and they're just coming through the door? So we get assigned in advance of a move, or they'll ask the student to do a certain number of tutorials in the first 2 weeks, or however they choose to work that as a sort of a piece. And obviously that student can do that without having other teachers having to work with them. They can do it individually. So we're often using that respect as well. So it varies really as to how we use it and how we deploy it. And the final piece is we're often deployed at scale. So obviously we're just putting a link in Google Classroom, and that could be 5,000, 10,000 people, 20,000 people going through that tutorial. So often where there's a big sort of transition to Google, we're using that space to support a transition because we can just sort of roll the links out, and then that puts the learning in place for people to go ahead and learn.
We're going to make sure that we have the links to everything that we're talking about on our show notes today. Of course, for more information about that program, you can head over to workspaceskills.com, a fantastic website where you can get all the information, check out their blogs. Their content is amazing. I mean, I know as a middle school teacher, I've been looking to do badges ever since I walked into the building. This is a fantastic opportunity for the students to, be working in a safe environment. I can control what they're learning. I can work with what they're learning. And together we could figure out how to help them get those Google skills so that way they can use them in their science, their social studies, their English, and their math classes. This is an amazing program, Andy.
Thanks. Yeah, it really was just that. And taking that in, it came from really taking that innovator mindset. We talked about the innovator program earlier, didn't we? But taking that sort of mindset about, is there a different way of doing this? Like, is there another way we can look at a problem and find a way of solving using technology? And actually, when we looked at the problem of how do you train young people, it just sort of naturally evolved and grew. And like everything in our space, we continue to iterate and grow. So we're now thinking, okay, what Google tools are coming into that? At the moment, we train every Google Workspace tool. But obviously, we're going to be retiring Jamboard soon. So we're going to take our Jamboard badges out for the first time. We're going to lose a set of badges, lose those badges. We're just thinking about how do we bring AI into that space. So we haven't got any Gemini badges in there yet, because obviously Gemini is not yet available in Google Workspace for education for under 18. So it doesn't seem relevant yet. But as Google put more AI in, we will obviously add and amend the badges. So we're always open to that, which is sort of where to go next with it. What tools do we put in there? What skills do we think young people need? So it's continually iterating and changing as we go. And that's been great to see as well.
Where do you see the future of all of this going? I mean, we've both been there pre-pandemic, during the pandemic. We've seen things go virtual. You're now running hybrid innovative academies. Where do you see the next 6 to 12 months going when it comes to this, online, face-to-face, virtual, hybrid PD system? And maybe you could tell us some of the things that you guys have got coming up.
Yeah, I think collectively, one of the things that is a bonus is the sort of being online makes things more accessible. If I think about taking the Innovator Program as an example, we could have just gone back to face-to-face. Before in 2019 and everything before, the only way of becoming a Google Certified Innovator was turn up a Google office for 3 days and do the Innovator Program. And that actually creates a barrier to people's accessibility of that program. Because if you're not in a role that will give you the time off work, or you can't physically travel, or you can't afford to travel to a Google office, because as much as Google's lots of places, its offices are very set locations, that created an issue with the barrier to entry around that program. The minute we went online, we expanded globally into countries and regions where we've never had innovators before. So instantly overnight, we just started hitting new countries, new regions, and they were bringing sometimes new challenges, but also a lot of challenges that we all see. What's been one of the most amazing things about that program going as globally as it has is actually a lot of teachers around the world have the same challenges. And actually how we can look at a challenge coming at us from Japan or coming at us from Malaysia and go, oh, I also have that problem in my classroom, although they've written it and think it's very localized to them. That's a very similar challenge to other teachers. So I think in terms of, going back to your question, that the hybrid has allowed us to be far more global. And if I then think about something like Workspace Skills for students, it's allowed us to scale like we could never have imagined. Like there's no way we would have scaled, Canopy where I work to 1 million people, but we can train 1 million people through deploying in that way. So it's forced us, doesn't it, to open up new avenues and new routes and make things more accessible. And that's one of the big things for me. One of the reasons why we set Canopy up as we did. So Canopy in the UK, it's called a community interest company, which is a type of non-profit. And we did that way because I'm really passionate about us making a difference to teaching and learning. So one of my personal beliefs is that technology can make a difference to teaching and learning. It can improve teaching and learning, but it only does that when we do it properly, when we know how to use the tools, when we understand the impact on teaching and learning, when we understand how to adjust our lessons using technology, and it comes from training. And that was sort of the underlying philosophy behind Canopy. So that's why I started Canopy. That's why we created Canopy. But it's about that growth. And I think that it is an exciting time. It's always been an exciting time because it's always changing. But things I think got more accessible. That's good. I think AI increases that accessibility because AI breaks down some of that knowledge barrier that we've had. I look across why do some students do well and why do some students not do well, and sometimes it's about access to information, that some students can access support and help and ask questions of people, and AI suddenly levels in that space, because a student can sit there with AI and ask questions and it will explain it to them, and then they can ask a follow-up question and it will explain that to them as well. And one of the things that excites me about the potential use of AI, I know we're not quite there yet with this, is how does that then level and make things more accessible for all? Does that mean a student who's got a passionate topic that they don't know anyone else is interested in can have that conversation, have that dialogue, and then improve their skills? And so, yeah, it's always been an exciting time, because I think it always changes, and that quite excites me in a way. But you're right, it has altered. In terms of like what's coming up in the next 6 months or so for us, without giving tons of things away, and a lot of it's very predictable. We're obviously, I said earlier, we're looking at where Workspace Skills goes next. Where do we go with that? What do we add to that piece? In our training sense, we're continuing to sort of grow our team and deliver more training at Canopy. So that's an exciting world. We've always been through a sort of growth phase since we started almost, but it's been exciting to watch that come to life and reach new places. And then my biggest focus right now is actually the Innovator Program going back face to face, and trying to remember, how did we do this in 2019? How did we manage to put this together as a face to face event? Because we need to rebuild that, but we need to rebuild it with the knowledge of what's it like when we've actually got the knowledge of what we can do online now, because we never really used online much around that program in 2019, and now we can bring what we know from hybrid back in. How do we merge the two together to make it a really good program? That's, I think, probably my biggest focus right now is that program coming back face to face. So congratulations to people who might be watching who got into Chicago. We've announced at this point that we're recording this, so this will always change. We've announced Chicago, so well done to people who got in there. We're getting close to announcing South Korea.
Wow.
I'll leave that as open as that is, because that's about to go live. When we have coming up next, and still people are applying for, Amsterdam is still open for applications. That's the English Language Academy. There's a virtual VIA 24, so there's an online academy still open for applications. So those are open and taking applications. So yes, there's still exciting stuff, lots to come.
Well, I'm always excited to get a chance to see everybody at ISTE, and I'm looking forward to probably running into you and everybody in your team in Denver this year at the ISTE conference. It is fantastic. Andy, thank you so much for coming on the show. Congratulations on everything. One last time, if anybody has any questions about any of these programs or looking for more information about Canopy, where can they go?
Yeah, our website is probably the easiest, at canopy.education. No ND on that, just canopy.education. Takes you to our website. Yeah, that's probably the best place to source information, or reach out to us on socials. We're on all the usual social media platforms.
And of course, we're going to make sure we have links to everything of Canopy Education on our show notes page. Don't forget to head on over to teachercast.net for a lot more podcasts, and hope you guys have a chance to check out this. Thank you so much for making TeacherCast a part of your professional development network. And on behalf of Andy and everybody here on TeacherCast, my name is Jeff Bradbury, reminding you guys to keep up the great work in your classrooms and continue sharing your passions with your students.
You've been listening to the TeacherCast Educational Network, hosted by Jeff Bradbury. Please reach out to the show with all of your questions on Twitter @TeacherCast or online at www.teachercast.net. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. And please take a moment to write a review in the App Store.